This tiny mechanism changed driving forever. It's actually so simple to explain that even a child could understand it. But how is it possible that this simple mechanism was able to change the way we drive? Well, it all has to do with what it replaced and why that thing just couldn't cut it in today's world. So let us take a look back in history to see how this one small part made such a huge difference. The year is 1908, when the first production model of the Ford Motor Company's quadricycle was presented to the public. The public loved the car. It was affordable, reliable, and most importantly, easy to drive. After all, anyone could drive a quadricycle, hence the name. But there were some issues. See, while the quadricycle was a great car for the time, it wasn't perfect. And people soon realized that it had one major flaw. The fact that anyone could drive it meant that there were plenty of inexperienced or careless drivers on the road, leading to more accidents. But that's not the only issue. See, the brakes on the quadricycle were downright dangerous. When the vehicle was first introduced to the public, it didn't even have any brakes at all. Eventually, they added a handbrake that could only slow the car down or stop it. If you wanted to turn, you had to steer into that turn and then slam on the brakes, which would sometimes cause you to skid right off the road. Suffice it to say, this system was far from ideal, and people started looking for a solution. Enter the electric ignition switch. This little mechanism is what eventually led to the invention of the self-starter, which in turn would completely change the way cars are driven forever. First things first, before we get too deep into how this little component changed the automotive industry, we need to talk about what it did. In short, the electric ignition switch was a device that allowed the driver to control the flow of electricity to the spark plug, which in turn would start the engine. Now you might be asking yourself, so what? How does this solve the problem of people slamming on their brakes and skidding off the road? To answer that question, we first need to take a step back and look at how engines used to start. Before electric ignition switches, most cars required a hand crank to start the engine. This meant that when you turned the crank, it would generate enough power to ignite the fuel in the engine, causing it to turn over. Once it was running, you could let go of the crank, and the engine would continue to run on its own. But there was a problem with this system. When the engine was cold, it was difficult to get it to turn over. This required a lot of effort, and sometimes even to people to start the engine. Not only that, but if the engine was running and you wanted to stop it, you had to turn off the fuel supply, which was located under the hood. This was a major safety hazard since anyone could potentially walk up to an idling car, turn off the fuel, and cause it to stall. These issues led to the development of the electric starter motor, which eliminated the need for a hand crank. All the driver had to do was turn the key in the ignition switch, and the engine would start automatically. This made it much easier to start the engine, especially when it was cold, but there was still a problem. You see, the old engines were designed to start and stop quickly. But with the electric starter motor, it was more common for drivers to start their vehicles and then leave them idling while they ran into the store or attended to something else. This meant that the engine was running without anyone in the driver's seat. So what happened if a child or pet wandered onto the road and walked in front of an idling car? Well, the answer was usually a horrible accident. But it wasn't until the introduction of the neutral safety switch that this would finally change. The neutral safety switch, also known as the gear position switch, is a device that prevents a vehicle from starting unless it's in park or neutral. This switch is typically located on the side of the transmission, and it's connected to the ignition switch. When the key is turned to start the engine, the switch sends a signal to the ignition coil, which then sends a high voltage current to the spark plugs, causing the engine to start. However, the switch won't send that signal unless the gear stick is in either park or neutral. If the gear stick is in any other position, the switch won't send the signal and the car won't start. This is done to prevent the car from lurching forward or backward when it's started. In addition to the neutral safety switch, there's also a backup safety system called a lockout, which prevents the gear stick from being shifted into gear, unless the key is in the start or on position. This ensures that the car can't be started in gear by accident. These switches and lockouts work together to ensure that the car is always in park or neutral when it's started. But why is this important? Well, it's crucial for safety reasons. If the car starts in gear, it could roll forward or backward before the driver has a chance to react, which could lead to an accident. The neutral safety switch and lockout system prevents this by ensuring that the car is in park or neutral when it's started. They also make it impossible to shift the car into gear until the engine is running, which again helps to prevent accidents. Before these features were standard in vehicles, it wasn't uncommon for cars to start moving unexpectedly when they were put into gear, often because someone forgot to put the car in park before leaving it unattended. This could be particularly dangerous in places like parking lots where pedestrians are present. But the introduction of the neutral safety switch and lockout system virtually eliminated this problem. Now, drivers no longer had to worry about their cars starting unexpectedly when they got back in them. And it's not just safety that these features improve. They also make it easier to drive a car, especially for new drivers who are still getting used to the feel of the vehicle, with the assurance that the car won't start moving until they're ready for it. New drivers can focus on other aspects of driving, such as steering and braking, without worrying about accidentally moving forward or backward. Overall, the neutral safety switch and lockout system is a critical component of any vehicle. These features not only make it safer for everyone on the road, but they also make it easier to drive a car, especially for new drivers. Now you're probably wondering, why haven't these been around since the beginning of cars? Well, the reason is pretty simple. The early cars simply didn't have the electronic components needed to make it possible. But as technology advanced, it became cheaper and easier to include these features in new vehicles. The neutral safety switch was invented in the early 1900s, but it wasn't until the 1960s that it became common practice for cars to have them installed. And while they were originally seen as optional extras, they quickly became standard features on most new cars. Today, you won't find a single car on the road without a neutral safety switch and lockout system. These features have saved countless lives and prevented countless accidents. But it's not just the neutral safety switch that has made driving safer and easier. Many other features have been added to vehicles over the years to improve safety and convenience. For example, seatbelts were first introduced in the 1960s, and airbags were introduced in the 1970s. Both features have significantly reduced the number of fatalities and injuries in car accidents. Other features such as anti-lock brakes, electronic stability control, and lane departure warning have also become standard on most new cars. These features have made driving safer and easier than ever before. As technology continues to advance, we can expect even more features to be added to vehicles in the future. Self-driving cars are already being tested on public roads, and it's only a matter of time before they hit the market. These cars will be able to avoid many of the accidents that occur today, making driving even safer. So the next time you get behind the wheel of a car, take a moment to appreciate all the features that have been added to make driving safer and easier. From the humble beginnings of the quadricycle to the advanced features of today's vehicles, we've come a long way. And it's all thanks to the brilliant minds who have dedicated their careers to improving the way we drive. Who knows what the future will hold? Maybe one day we'll all be cruising around in self-driving cars that can avoid every possible accident. Until then, we can still appreciate the progress that has been made and the role that simple mechanisms like the neutral safety switch have played in making driving the safest and most convenient way to get around.